So welcome to the three-part webinar series, Expand Your Digital Knowledge with the iTero Element. It is a webinar being presented by Kelly Bevington and Brittany Carey. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Kelly Bevington, RDA, EFDA, Director of Intraoral Technology. Kelly began her career in dentistry as a registered dental assistant by graduating from the Bryman College in Anaheim, California, and becoming an EFDA over 20 years ago. He has a comprehensive knowledge of dentistry and the dental laboratory industry, holding positions in sales, operations, marketing, and most recently with NDX managing our intraoral scanning training team. Kelly has clinically trained over 500 dentists, their teams, dental students, and residents, professionally trained on most major devices, expert on scanning, tissue retraction, management, and isolation. Kelly enjoys sharing her knowledge and has presented at the AACD, contributed to several cosmetic dentistry publications, and most recently authored a couple iOS blogs. Take it away, Kelly.
And I would like to introduce Brittany. So I'm going to start with a short PowerPoint presentation, and then Brittany's going to do the live demonstration tonight. Brittany is a registered dental hygienist, and she has been practicing. She's been a intraoral scanner trainer for, I'm not sure how many years now, 5+ anyway, working with DSO groups, specifically working with manufacturing companies to support our customers. Just a little disclosure, Brittany and I are both full-time employees here at NDX. And tonight is taking your skills to the next level. So last week was for basics, beginners, really 101. And now we're going to up the game a little bit. This is our intraoral scanner training team. There are 4 of us to support your scanner training efforts across the country. So myself, I sort of float nationally. Brenda Kirkin is in the Midwest. Benester Poe is on the East Coast. And then Brittany covers west of the Mississippi. And I always like to identify to people, you know, what can you do with your scanner? And today I can really say anything that you can take a polyvinyl siloxane impression, you can take a digital impression for. So crowns, bridges, inlays, onlays, veneers, as well as implants and surgical guides, bruxism appliances, partials and dentures now too. And we're really excited to be able to educate people as this technology continues to evolve. One of our handouts is specific to providing some tips and tricks or best practices for tissue management as well as isolation. And I always like to show this picture. Dr. Duplantis had provided it to me. And it's really a textbook prep and isolation so that you can see the margins 360 degrees. So even though we're going to talk about bridges tonight, this is what you want the prep part of your abutment teeth to look like. We're also going to address efficiencies, right? Like how to increase your speed and how to increase your accuracy. And one thing specific to iTero that is really important to follow is to always scan the occlusal surfaces first, then the lingual or palatal surfaces, and lastly, wrapping up on the buccal. And I've worked with many, many doctors and assistants who, you know, aren't necessarily rule followers and they want to change it up a little bit. And I can just guarantee you that if you do the OLB, occlusal lingual buccal, you will become faster and the accuracy of your scans will greatly improve. So one of the things that's really important that we're really trying to hit home with every communication we have publicly is the importance of scanning the prep and only the prep during the prep tooth segment, meaning not to scan the adjacent teeth, not to scan the interproximal walls of those adjacent teeth, and only scanning that prep in a good 8 to 10 seconds, starting with the crosshairs over the occlusal and then rolling lingually and buccally, really making sure that you're deliberate in that roll, allowing the light to really shine into the sulcus which is capturing the data and acquiring the information. Then you want to make sure that you're evaluating the prep itself before moving on to the segments. Lastly is going to be to do your opposing and your bite registration, and making sure that you assess your scan and that your bite registration is accurate and your occlusion is proper. So again, it's opposing arch. It could be the prep arch first or the opposing arch. What Brittany's going to demonstrate two different ways to do that by including a pre-preparation scan as well. And then lastly is going to be your prescription. Some different analyzing tools that we'll be reviewing tonight, including how you can identify the prep itself and alternate any of the dye separation space as well. The occlusal clearance guide will help you identify, where you're seeing the red on the prep. So think of, red as stop for the stop sign, that it's the bad, and how to potentially correct that, erase it, re-prep it, and then rescan as well. And we refer to those, iTero refers to those as corrective action tools. So we've got our occlusal clearance corrections. These are some images that you will see live. And it acts as though it's similar to the fill tool, where you're able to erase data, it encircles it in the red, and then when you rescan over that, it's going to turn tooth colored again. And you're always accessing those menus by tapping on the screen, and it's sort of a hard press or hold to activate the menu that appears before you, including the fill tool. So the fill tool can be used at the end, currently at the end with the software program most offices have now. Align is in the process of pushing some new software. We are currently working with the previous software that allows you to utilize the fill tool at the conclusion of all your scans. And that's going to be shifting so that you're able to use that software in the middle of the scans, which is personally my preference. Next week, when I do my scanning section, we hope to have that software upgrade. It's coming out incrementally.
Kelly, we have a question.
Yes.
When retracting, is retracting paste not as effective as a retracting cord?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So I like to say that I'm perhaps a little old school. So I grew up with cord, and I prefer a double cord technique, meaning I'll place a double or triple zero first, followed by perhaps another double zero or a one, whatever the sulcus can really accept, and have the patient perhaps bite into a copper cap, wait a couple minutes before coming back in, making sure everything's really nice and dry, removing the top cord, but I leave that first cord in place. And why I do that is to keep the sulcular fluids from rising, right? To keep it really dry so that you don't have any seepage and prevent hemorrhaging from occurring again. So that's why I like the cord, is to keep it a little drier, a little longer. And sometimes you don't experience that with paste. The other thing with retraction paste is, although it's a great hemostatic agent also, you really need to be able to express it into the sulcus for it to work effectively, because you want to create that lateral and apical retraction of the gingival tissue. And sometimes I've been in offices where the paste is just sort of placed on top of the gingival tissue, and it acts great as that hemostatic agent, but it doesn't do anything for actual retraction. So if paste is used correctly, it can be as effective as cord. My personal preference is cord. Great, I think that was it. And then, so this is how you reach us as far as the team, via email or by an 800 number. And of course, we thank you for your time and attention tonight. And last but not least is the image of us. So this is our team. And Brittany's going to move forward with the actual demonstration from here. And
great. Okay, so let's get started. We are at the home page of the scanner. As soon as you turn it on, this is what we see. We did discuss quite a bit at our last webinar. And to continue practicing, we're going to go into demo mode again. If you all remember, it's just going into the iTero element logo, clicking on it, selecting demo mode. And all we have to do is choose a doctor name. I'm choosing Dr. iTero Demo. Perfect. Okay, I'm just gonna go forward with a new scan. New patient scan. Type in a first name. Bridge test. And the scanner is trying to help me out here. Hey, look, a patient already exists. I'm gonna select add. Is this the same patient? Why, actually, yes, it is. Super great for avoiding putting in duplicate patients into your scanner. Again, we're just following the red asterisks prompts to put in all of the proper information in the RX. So I'm selecting restorative. Say we are scanning a bridge, sending it to Clear Smiles. Just a reminder, that is not a real lab. Any scan done in demo mode does not actually get sent out anywhere, which is great. Great for practice. And it doesn't interfere with your patient base either. So you always want to be practicing in demo mode. So we see right here, we've got this pre-treatment scan option. I'm going to click on this box here to enable that. Why would we use a pre-treatment scanning workflow? To provide additional information of the existing dentition to the lab. So if a patient has a long-term provisional, say that they like, the lab can duplicate it. If you're scanning for implants, that's when you would scan the emergence profile. But it's also great to capture more information while the patient is becoming anesthetized before treatment has actually been started. Because, you know, the patient hasn't had their mouth open for an extended period of time yet, So my prep here, I'm going to start with my tooth number. Number 2, select bridge. And up here at the top, I'm going to distinguish how many units my bridge is. So I've got 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to select each individual tooth and mark what they are. So number 2, prep, is an abutment. Again, looking at those asterisks, I'm going to select full contour zirconia, chamfer, and a random body. Number 3, I do want to point out here, you do have this option for selecting removed from bridge. For cases where maybe the patient is missing a tooth and you don't want that tooth to be included in the bridge. But for today, it'll be a Pontic. Clicking on 4, it'll be another abutment. And we just saw our handy dandy copy from tooth become available as a time saver, just in case, you know, any information is the same. If we wanted to change, say, the shade, all we had to do was click, deselect this box here, and choose a different shade.
we do love the copy feature. It's unique to iTero, and it's a time saver.
Definitely. Now we see our treatment information, looks good. Notes, of course, any additional information that you would like to provide to the lab is always appreciated. Communication is key. So I do encourage you to put something in there. I'm going to hit the scanner icon to move forward. We are ready to scan. Now the pre-treatment scanning portion.
Brittany, I'm going to pause you for one moment. The question came up, what did the copy from Tooth copy? It copied your material selection, your preparation design, as well as the shade.
Correct. And had I put any other information in there, it would have copied all of that as well.
Yes, great question.
So we see quite a bit here. Part of the pre-treatment scanning workflow, before treatment has been started, we can capture the prep arch, the opposing arch, and the bite. So that way, all we have left once the preps have been completed are scanning the preps and getting the prep arch once more. Again, you can see we have the guidance hints enabled still. Highly recommend that you keep them enabled as a visual refresher for new team members or anyone that still is getting used to all the different types of workflows with the iTero. We can see a couple different things here. We've got a green screen, which is indicative that we are in the pre-treatment scanning screen. We have a 1, which indicates the pre-treatment scanning workflow. And when we are done with that, it'll bring us over to 2, which is our once we've started or completed our treatment. Again, highly recommend that we use the arrow prompts here to help us move forward with our scans. Just make sure we are following along. Now the model that I have to hold, so I will be as steady as possible. Again, like Kelly had stated, occlusal lingual buccal is the scan path protocol that we want to follow. Wrap on over to the lingual. Really get that angulation. Make sure we're getting at least 2 to 4 millimeters of gingival tissue in the process. Wrap around the incisal edge for good measure. Now, ideally, you want this scan to be as perfect as possible before we move forward, because obviously these teeth wouldn't be preps, right? So just making sure you're capturing all of the information in the first go. Spinning it around, getting a 360 view. I do have an abnormality on my model here that we're just gonna ignore. Just gonna ignore it, okay? We're gonna go to the second prompt, wants us to scan the lower. Just a reminder, this is all being done before treatment has been started.
And Brittany, while you're scanning, I'm just going to speak a little bit to what that could mean, right? So it could be that you're working 2 columns and you have an assistant that has one-on-one time with the patient. Doctor's running a little behind, and she or he could begin scanning before you ever come in and anesthetize the patient. Or perhaps you've just anesthetized the patient and it's going to be 10 to 15 minutes or less, 5 to 10 minutes before you're coming back to actually prep the tooth. So in that downtime, the assistant could indeed scan the upper, the lower, and the bite registration, so that after you prep the tooth, all you have to do is scan the preparation and those adjacent teeth, just that small quadrant area.
Perfect. So with a bite, we just want to remember that the patient needs to be biting in centric occlusion. As soon as you see that purple, that means that the scanner has indeed captured the bite. And we can move on. Just a reminder, sometimes the purple bite will be down here. Just give the scanner a few seconds to kind of figure out where it belongs. I'm going to hit the next prompt. Okay, now we are finally in the treatment's been completed. I'm actually going to switch to monochrome for scanning. It wants us to scan number 2 first. We're going to center the prep, the crosshairs on the prep. About 8 to 10 seconds is all it needs to take. Just a reminder, we are moving that green dot to the center of the prep always. That is just a reminder, that's kind of what tells the scanner, you know, this is my prep, the identifier. Go to the next prompt. Wonderful. And just as Kelly had stated before, all we need in the prep segments of the scan is the prep. We don't require the adjacent contacts until this. Yeah. Again, getting that angulation is so important to show the true height, length of the preps. And rolling over that incisal edge for good measure. Now at this point, we can use our fill tool to capture any missing data. So I'm just going to backtrack all the way to the beginning just to demonstrate that you see here, right here, there's a little lock icon. You are able to unlock that, but since, you know, it's not going to look like this anymore, it's not really a good idea to do so. But we could use the fill on the opposing if we needed to.
Brittany, to interrupt you just for a moment, a question came up asking if you were scanning the bite registration prior to preparing the teeth. And yes, in this particular example, Brittany utilized the pre-treatment scan box. She checked that box back on the original RX screen, and that enables you to scan the maxillary arch, the mandibular arch, and the bite registration prior to ever prepping the tooth. The interesting thing with the bite registration is it's not really a third scan per se. It is you using the camera from the scanner wand to pick up points of data, that single swipe, if you will, and then the computer software merges that maxillary and mandibular arch together. So that's what enables you to be able to take the bite registration prior to the tooth being prepped. And there's certainly some benefits to doing that. You know, one, the patient is still pretty comfortable. They haven't been upside down on their head with their cheeks stretched for a good hour. And I find that bite registrations done this way can very often be more accurate. Great question.
Yeah, thank you.
Here's another one, which
Yeah.
makes sense to do it now. If you adjust the opposing after preparing the tooth to maybe get more occlusal clearance, would you just go back and redo the opposing and bite? And the answer to that is yes, you can redo the bite. You don't necessarily have to redo the bite, but certainly you would need to rescan the operative scan of the prep, and we will do an example and show that to you this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Perfect. So really quick, I just wanted to again introduce these tools for us. I'm just holding my finger on the screen, and we've got these 4 options. Segment would be to erase all of the data, all of the scan that we just did. If we wanted to just erase and start all over, typically use that if, still not really capturing all the information that I need, but I can tell that it's been too long and I'm probably over scanning. I'll just erase and start over. Selection, you can use your finger to kind of sweep away information, but I find that I sweep too much. I sweep away the good data, so I kind of steer clear of that tool there. But the fill tool is our best friend. The fill tool identifies areas of missing data, it encloses it in red, and it adds the data to the base layer of the scan, which is exactly what we want, because that's what the labs receive, is just the base layer. They do not receive any additional layer, so that's why it's so super important to scan efficiently and as quick as possible. There we go. So you can see that when you fill in the data, it turns a yellow color, and that's because I have my model set to monochrome. I could set it to color if I wanted by hitting this button right here, but it's not as clear. The red wouldn't go away. It would just turn tooth colored. So for demonstration purposes, I do want to make sure that you guys are able to see that I'm capturing this data. Let's see.
And there is a timer. There is a timer associated to this. So once you hit the fill tool and it encircles in red, you really want to begin scanning right away. If you don't, the encircled air, the red circle could potentially disappear and you don't really realize it. And then if you start scanning, you're adding layers, not truly using the fill tool. So just to be conscious of that. Question, is it better to do fill feature before or after post processing? I would say after.
Using the fill tool?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends of which software you have. Like right now, the software on my particular scanner, I need to do it after the fact. I think I haven't seen it yet, but I think once the new comes out, you're able to do it prior as well.
Yes, as soon as you're done scanning, you should, with the newest update, you should be able to utilize the fill tool before you move on to the next scanning segment. And that is all before post-processing. So I made sure that I captured all the information that I need. My scans are looking great. I'm going to move on to post-processing. Oh, that was pretty quick. Okay. So you can see that the first thing to always appear is the occlusal clearance map. If we see that we do need to, maybe we didn't perform enough occlusal reduction, the best thing to do would be to utilize the eraser tool right here. We would turn the scan to a lateral view. That's not really lateral. Okay. Hit the eraser tool. And I'm just going to circle this one. Unfortunately, at least at this time, you are not able to, if you needed to perform, occlusal reduction on both of the preps, you're unfortunately not able to do both of them at the same time. But maybe that'll be a future update. So once I enclose the top half, I can click right here on the scanner icon, and it brings us back. And for this, you just really need a good kind of circle to make sure it's captured. Doesn't take too long. Still, I want to make sure it's a good scan for you all. So I'm going to go back to post-processing.
The reason why you want to take it from the buccal or the lingual, that lateral view that Brittany mentioned, is so that if indeed your preparation itself was beautiful, you don't want to inadvertently erase any of your beautiful margin and have to rescan it after perhaps there's been some tissue collapse.
Thank you for clarifying that, for sure.
Of course.
Definitely important. And you can too, if maybe you were scanning the prep in color, and then when you finally went to post-processing, you noticed that maybe there was some cord poking out, some fluid, you could use the same eraser tool and just carefully circle the area and kind of, just clean that up and rescan it. But again, the only, thing that would be concerning to risk is the tissue collapsing. So right here, I think my bar's in the way. Okay. Can you see my mouse right here? This icon here is the prep separating tool. And what this does, it's basically a virtual die, is it puts your preps in high definition, and you can either add information. Maybe we weren't close enough to the prep and we had missed part of the margin. So we can add, we can take away information. And I'm just alternating with these. And you just circle it. You can hit this button right here to enable you to move the scan around. I'm going to do that with the other prep as well.
An example that is probably most frequently used is when it's multiple units in the anterior, where sometimes the initial scan will overlap over each other. So it's important to do the die separation to really identify clearly for the laboratory which scan goes with which tooth.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, when you're doing a single posterior or even a 3-unit bridge, as long as you have that green circle dead center in the middle of the prep before moving on to the segment, typically you're in pretty good shape.
Yes. Yeah, I probably should have demonstrated that, huh? Had we moved it maybe over here, then this information probably would not have been included, and it would have been more so over here. What else? What else? So there is one more tool, one more corrective tool that we can use. And unfortunately, it's not in demo mode right now. So I'm gonna actually log in to my account. And just a reminder, to get out of demo mode, we just hit the iTero element logo once again, hit exit demo. And I had already scanned this earlier this morning. So it's under orders. It says my status is scanning. So we can view the RX scan or view the scans. Because we were already scanning, I'm just going to go back into scanning and show you guys in post-processing the margin marking tool.
That was perfect. We just had an inquiry about the margin marking tool.
Yay! Okay, just want to make sure I got everything. Okay. So right down here is the margin marking tool. If I click on it, the scanner is going to automatically mark the margin for me, whether I want it to or not. So we'll get to see that here momentarily. Perfect. Now, once again, since my model is white, it's not really helpful to see it in color, so I'm changing it to monochrome. Changes it again to that gold high definition. Looking at this 360 degrees around, sometimes it is not perfect. We do have the ability to move dots, and you can move them anywhere you want. And you kind of have to be careful with what view. So if I'm doing it from this view and I mark this one, I can turn it. Well, that's not right.
Right, you can see how it falls off the margin.
Yes, so it is very important, that 360 view. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the X, which is going to get rid of the margin. And then I can actually put my finger on the screen and start marking the margin myself.
On the rare occasion, there's an anomaly, a defect in the anatomy of the tooth. There's a furcation, something that's unusual that you might find the need to really want to mark the margin yourself. But outside of those examples, I really find that it's the laboratory technicians who are the experts at marking margins. I mean, they mark margins all day long. And I don't encourage dentists necessarily to mark them unless one of those oddities are occurring. The same as, when I first got involved in dentistry, the dentist I worked for wanted to ditch his own dies. It's rare that I see that in dentistry today. If that's what you like to do, then certainly we can accommodate that. But it's a great feature to have when you need it, but it's not a mandatory feature for use.
Perfect. I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, so here was a question, Brittany. Do you recommend marking the margin or leaving it to the lab? So I think I just answered that. I personally leave it to the lab unless it's a very, very special case. Another one, how are you moving the scan without making the margin move also. So it's not there right now, but can you get it back to the screen where the swirl is in the middle down at the bottom? I think that's.
You bet. Okay, so if I hit the X and get rid of it, usually there's a little icon here, and if it's blue, that's telling you that you can move the scan around as much as you want. If it's grayed out, that means your scan is kind of locked because the scanner is waiting for your finger to do all the work. So if I just tap here on the screen, and then I hold down on the screen as I move it. Does that make sense? So it's not, the scanner's smart enough to know that I'm just maneuvering it to make sure that I can see it from all angles as I mark.
Great, thank you. Here's another question. Does the scan get sent to iTero and then they choose the margins rather than the lab? I'll take that answer, and it's a yes and no sort of answer. So there's something called iTero modeling and interpretation. So the files go through modeling and interpretation, and they have the capability to remove layers of data, right? So if there's too much over scanning, they can help the lab by removing some of those layers of data and also mark the margin. Some of that is done via AI, artificial intelligence with a human touch before it comes to the laboratory. And then the laboratory has that final thumbs up or not as to whether to proceed as is or if to mark it themselves. Now, if you marked your margin, I understand the process to be that it still goes through modeling and interpretation, but it comes to the lab with your marked margin. And then if the lab has any questions about the way you marked it, they will of course reach out to you. So in the event you choose to mark your own margin, I do recommend to people to put in the notes section of the RX page that you marked the margins, and please follow my marked margins, or please call me about my marked margins if you have any further inquiries.
And that, just to piggyback off of that, that would be as easy as going to back to the RX and putting that in the notes.
Yes. Perfect. While you're on the RX, Brittany, I'd like to address a question that came up early, but I didn't find it to be a good time to answer it at that time. And the question was, how do you add labs to your scanner? So you can see where the send to section is here. How you actually have a lab added though is to telephone iTero directly. So you need to phone iTero, or you can email iTero and ask them to add a lab. There's not a drop-down menu per se that you can activate a lab from. And typically the name of the lab and their iTero ID code is required by the support people at Align Technologies to add that lab to your scanner. They will also ask you for your scanner ID, and that is, are you able to demonstrate that? Yeah, perfect.
Hi, yeah. So I went straight over here to the gear, which is the scanner settings. And it would be right here under system information.
Perfect.
And your office ID is located just right here.
Excellent.
You would provide the office ID as well as the laboratory ID, like Kelly had said. I just wanted to point out something really quick.
Sure.
when I'm holding the scanner, if you can look here in the TeamViewer window, you can kind of see it's a little scuffed up from my chalky model, which is fine. But sometimes we can get fluid on there that dries. Sometimes the lens itself underneath the sleeve can be dirty. And it's very important to check that out before you start scanning every patient. So I took the lens, or not the lens, I took the scanner sleeve off, and you can see that the lens looks fine. Super great. But if I were to put on a different sleeve and it's scuffy, that could definitely prevent the scanner from collecting data in an efficient, fast manner. It can also cause distortion with the scans. So just something to keep in mind. Housekeeping as far as cleaning the lens. In the box of sleeves, usually it's at the bottom. It kind of blends in with the box, really. You'll find these little cloths, and you can cut them up into small pieces, but that is the only thing that should be touching the lens itself. So you can try wiping the lens dry, and if it's still smudged, you can use a drop of alcohol, and usually that is just fine. And then, of course, when the scanner is not in use, if you have your blue scanner tip, amazing, you want to make sure that that is put on to cover the lens to protect it when it's not in use. And then, of course, again, that is a great identifier to anyone that walks up to the scanner at any time, so they know it has been disinfected and sterilized, and it's ready to be used again.
Excellent. I think that concludes everything we really wanted to make sure we addressed. So just to sort of recap and provide a little framework for what we're going to review next week is that the focus is completely on implants. I'll also review a couple more icons on here. Something we're starting to use more frequently are screenshots as a communication tool for the laboratory. And I'll review the process on how to take a screenshot, how to make some notations on it, and send it to the laboratory as well. Big thanks to each of you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us this evening. We all understand very clearly that you have lots of choices for education and where to go and how to acquire it. And thank you so much for choosing to spend an hour's worth of your time with us this evening. We really, truly enjoy what we have the privilege of doing for a living. All three of us, we really, truly enjoy what we do. And I so enjoy sharing that passion with all of you, and hope it rubs off on everybody, that excitement.
And with
Great
that,
point.
Thank you all very much. Again, we appreciate your time, attention, and participation, and we're really glad that you were here with us this evening.